Let's see if we can build an electronics tray or pan to go under the seat. Welcome to Urban Monk TV. So one of the things I've been wanting to do, and have done a couple of times along the line, is fit the tank on here so that I can look at my lines. But all the while, I have been setting it like this without having... You stay there? Yeah. Without having these little rubber, I don't know what you want to call them, little rubber doodads on here that the tank slides into, and of course they hold the tank at a certain height in the front. So from now on I'm starting to bring those out and use them, just because I want to make sure the front is actually the height it's going to be. And I'm going to have to build something back here to bring the tank up in line with this line all the way back, because otherwise it sags a little bit. So I want to make sure I have those rubber grommet things, spacers, in place before I start fashioning something up for that. So that is not much of a rise. That'll be trickier than it looks. So there is where the tank normally mounts, and I need to bring it up to about here. So I guess one quick option would be just to increase the amount of space between, but really that's normal right there with a rubber spacer and the bolt. And I want to come up to about here, so I think of how I'm going to go about doing that. So the way this used to be mounted was with this thing, and there was probably some kind of rubber backing behind this bracket at one point, and then you would put this down on top of it, and then this guy went in like that. But this bike's been through several hands in the past, and if I crank it all the way up to there and use the existing bolt hole, I'm still not high enough. I want to be a little bit higher than that. If I take this out, remove this stopper, that's closer. It's not quite there. I'd actually rather be like right here. Yeah, let me look at that once. Like right about there. So I gotta measure that distance, and then I think we're gonna have to make a new mount hole and come up with some kind of a rubber isolating shim of sorts. I'll figure this out. The other thing I found in my box of parts is this little rubber shim guy that he's just a little mount that tank rides on. If I could raise that up, possibly. Let's see. Yeah, well, so that does set on there, but too low. But yeah, if I gave that, a 1/4 inch, I'm thinking 1/4 inch. There I have my line. Now I'll show you what I put under there to achieve that. Try not to chuckle or just laugh out loud. It's a sanding block and it's the right height. I think I'm just going to remove I'll cut away all of the sanding and trim this thing down and figure out a way to glue that on there. But I still need to bring my mount hole up, so I'm going to have to make a little adapter. It's like filleting fish. Now my concern is, will this hold up over time? I don't know what kind of foam this is made of, but if it were to wear out over time and with heat cycles, I know where to get more very cheaply. These are Harbor Freight foam blocks. Crazy. Now it might be a little short. No, it's close. I got more of those. I'll play with it a little bit. And I still have to find a way to deal with this. I think what I'm going to do is cut a short piece of plain bar, flat bar. I'll put a 8mm screw. These are 8mm by 1 1/4 pitch, and then mount another drill hole up here, and I can tap it for threads, or I can put a nut behind it if I want, and just bring my mount up a little higher with just a little piece of metal. So let's get some height on this thing. I think I'm going to make the bar go all the way down to the bottom here, so that it doesn't want to tip side to side when I finally mount it in. Otherwise, if I have it here, then the whole thing could twist on the bolt, if that makes sense. I think I want to go maybe roughly that high, and I can always cut it down. So, let's see, I think I had it this way. I got this socket cap screw earlier today. So if that were in there, loosely fit it for now. Now I can mount a little higher. Let's Let's see. Put in my spacer foam. So we should be able to put a screw or another hole to mount up here. Sorry, I'm going to have to get my head in here for a second. I'm thinking if I can put a bolt right there, then I'll be holding it rigidly at the height I want, and I can still put that little rubber, where did you go? I can still put this little guy behind here. And that'll be it. And now my line is straight on the other side. Let's go check that again. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now that I have this mounted up, I see I've got just a little bit of an interference with a piece of the frame behind there. So I'll just cut that down. So no more interference. And so now I've got, this was the existing bolt that the gas tank mounts with. It had this kind of flange to it. And there used to be a piece of rubber in here that's just since fallen apart, but I'm just going to take this old grommet from the side covers that I still have laying around, and then I'll put this between, whoop, and we'll put the tank on. And then I've got 8mm nut to go behind with a washer. So let's try to mount this up. Trick is going to be getting this nut in here. Maybe I want to weld a nut on there. Well, that'll be a struggle though. You figure this out. Okay, so I think I've got this. I've got the nut and the washer behind there right now. And I'm going to bring this guy in. Put that down on top, and then I can reach in from underneath right here. There we go. Now I'm at least in the hole, I think. Am I? Oh, I'm a little high. There. Grab a socket. There we go. Okay, so I got it started, and then there is room to get an open-end wrench up onto that nut in the back. Right. Hit the turn on. There. I think that's going to be it. So now my tank is on with a nice good bone line, and There I'm lifting the frame by the tank. That will work. So anyways, that's one man's approach to it. You know, maybe there's a better way. I did that. I could say one improvement would be probably to weld the nut to the back of that piece of bar that we made, so that I don't have to fiddle up here so much with a wrench to get that nut behind secured. But it's on there. And the other thing I'll say about why I didn't weld the nut on the back is it's a zinc plated nut, you know, galvanized, so they don't weld well. If I had a plain steel nut, I probably would have just tacked that thing on there, and maybe I'll do that later, but for now this is working. So here are my thoughts so far on the tray. I want the tray not to hang below the frame here, because otherwise that just gives a thicker appearance to the eye here. I just want a nice clean line in the back. So I want the bottom of the tray to be exactly flush with the bottom of this hoop, which will give me, you know, the maximum amount of space in here that I can get without messing up my aesthetics below. And so I measure this. I get a little over 25 millimeter. So cut that in half, you know, 12.5. Let's just call it an even 13. So I'll want to go 13 millimeters down and have my cut edge. It'll be the top of my tray, and then I can weld and just tack that tray along here. So the sides are going to be 13 millimeter, and then of course the obvious thing is what the width is going to be. I don't have this in millimeters. 6 and I'd say 6 and 6/8. Well, that's a quarter, 3/4. Yeah, it narrows up a little bit here. 6 3/4. Maybe it'll taper out a bit here. No, it's still 6 3/4. So let's think about how we're going to bend that metal and mark it. So this is just a plain sheet of 22 gauge sheet metal, and this is going to be our electronics and battery tray within the frame hoop. I need to get another piece of this though to do the front, because I may have electronics that are immediately under the seat also. We'll see. Just because I think the wiring harness is, well, expecting things to go there, and the less extra soldering and stretching of wires that I have to do, I would say the better. So I think I'll get another piece of this. But for now we're working on the back part of the frame. Back here, this is what we're going to fill in with a tray. So the first thing I want to do is get a line 13 millimeters from the edge, because that is my drop down. Not bad though, actually. So 13, go to about here. Oops. Oh, got that right on anyways. Okay, then from there I've got 6 13/16. I'm assuming that I'm going to have some material taken up in the bend that I do here, so let's allow for that. I'm going to allow, a good 1/16 of an inch or more for that. So starting at 1, 6 and 13/16 will be 7 and 13/16. Right there. And one down here. Okay. Okay, so it's the inside of that line. And then I need another small gap to allow for the bend. And then we got to go up 13 millimeters again. Work. Okay, starting to get something here. I think I'll first start by cutting this down to size. I'm going to try to freehand this with the grinder with a cutting wheel in it. So I'm just going to start by clamping it down. Actually got another idea. If I put this piece of bar under the clamps and clamp it in the right place and then just run this guard along that, that'll keep my blade straighter. Gives me a nice straight edge. So I'm going to try to work out the metrics on that here quickly. One thing I want to add is I started thinking about a bend here, all of that's going to take up material, and I don't want these sides to be too short, so I actually went just probably another 1/16 of an inch this way just to give myself more material. So I don't know, it's one of those decisions you kind of make on the fly. I can see I'm already going to be too close on the clamp here, but well, that's most of the way, and it's pretty straight. Got a little curvy over here, but that's not going to matter because I'm only using this section. So I just got to cut this loose, and I'll just freehand that, and then I'll cut that loose. There it is. Again, I got a little off down here, but we're probably cutting about here. So for the most part, I'm pretty good here. Now we have to get the length right. 12.5 inches plus the depth we want for the tray. And this gets a little tricky around here, but I think what I'm going to first do is just cut a rectangle, and then we'll finish the rest by hand with some tin snips. That is the actual length plus 2 13 millimeter. So 2 13 millimeters will be 26. And then I'm going to throw in another 4 millimeters for bending. So I went to 30 millimeters. clean this edge up. It's a little sharp and there's some bits and strands of metal coming off of there. I'm going to do it on the grinding wheel. You could do this with you know, a hand file, or even excuse me, even a hand sanding block. Okay, so now things get tricky. I gotta do a cut out that way to allow for a fold here and a fold here. That'll be easy in the corners. Here's where it gets a lot more tricky. I'm gonna have to round and have some little bits and, you know, maybe 1/2 inch or less, maybe I don't know, 3/8 of an inch to make this radius, and just keep bending them over, maybe even with a vice grip. I don't want it to look too cheesy, but ultimately it's going to be hidden under the seat cowls, so we'll see. But I think we're good size here so far. Okay, so for these corners I'm just going to cut out these little bits so that I can fold up, and I'll just tack a weld in between. It's probably not even necessary because the whole thing's going to be welded inside of the frame, but maybe it'll make it look good. And then here I got to do some snipping and just round this out. Might try to put this piece under there and get a radius, but let's just do this first. And for these small bits I'm going to try just the regular tin snips. Should be sufficient. Yeah. This is only 22 gauge steel, so I'm okay. There we go. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, as Zach Kortz would say. Alright, now let's think about this other side. So we need a radius. Can we get it from here? No. Well, yeah. We can do this, and we can draw from underneath. Something like that. Of course, that's not where our cut line is. We're out 13 millimeters from that. So I made a bit of a dotted line around here. That should give me enough material to fold up, and then this will be the absolute inside of my tray. And tin snips. Going with too much material rather than too little. I can always cut some away, but I don't want to have too little. Should have gloves on. Very happy I cleaned up the edges of this now, because my hand would be all cut up by now if I hadn't. Alright, we got a radius. So I don't have what is called a brake for bending good angles in sheet metal, but I do have this piece of wood with a nice square edge to it. I have this bar. I've got a couple of clamps. So I'm going to try to get creative. So I'm trying to get the cleanest bend I can, and put couple of different ideas into this. I still don't think this is working. I'm very close to just grabbing the hammer and getting this thing done. Alright, this is what I've arrived at. Oops. That ain't bad for something that's going to be hidden under the seat and welded. So for these long bends now, I'm going to do the same way, but I put a cut at an angle there and there so that I can just bend this line straight without folding the metal over there. I just want to show you how I've mounted this up, with that fold going down that way and then like that. I can see already we're going to need some modification because the frame isn't exactly square where it comes together. There's rounded edges to it, and this piece from here to here is already too wide to fit in, so I'll probably end up doing just a little bit of grinding and futzing around just to clean that up. But I'm going to bend this next. I'm starting to kind of draw the metal, swinging like this as I come across it at that particular point. Then once I get far enough down, I'll just go straight in. Okay, so the difficulty I've got is I've got straight lines that come back here, but then I've got welded gussets that bring this together in this area, so it's narrower here than it is out here or here, and I'm having to do some massaging to get this thing in here, but it is starting to fit. I can get that down in, but driving it that way is still tough. So I'm going to have to hammer it down past those welds, but I also need to start getting to work here now and folding this up. And I'm just going to start by making cuts all along here and bend each of them up. So now I'm actually cut all the way into my radius line here. So that's what I've got so far. Gonna have to work it down gingerly into its place and get the welder out and start tacking it in. Well, that's going to have to be it for this week, you guys. I'm sorry, but it's my wife's birthday. This is her birthday weekend, and so we're going to do some things for her tomorrow, and so I only have this morning to work on the bike. But we got some cool things done. I'm really happy about getting the bone line straight on the tank there, and we've made good progress here. I would have loved to have wrapped this episode up with this thing actually welded in. But we will get to it, and I will include it. I'm not going to do that and not record it and share it with you guys. So it's just coming in a future episode. If you want to know when that future episode is up and be alerted, just subscribe. And if you like what I'm doing here, click like. Thanks for watching.